What is up YouTube, and welcome to this Snowpiercer Season 2 Episode 1 breakdown. Just like the lockdown in the UK, the Snowpiercer has come around very quickly and nothing has really changed as we pick up directly from the end of Season 1 where the tale has revolted successfully, except the Snowpiercer itself is falling apart still, and they thought that the Big Alice supply train would save them. But except secretly, Mr. Wilford had taken over the Big Alice and ruled it with a seemingly iron fist and clamped itself to the Snowpiercer. Now before we go into the breakdown, there will be spoilers for this episode, and if you enjoyed the video, then please do drop a like down below and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a video. We open with another cool animation as Leighton says that the tale and the Big Alice, where the connection has taken place, is the border between Big Alice and the Snowpiercer. The power dynamic has changed heavily, and it's quite a welcome change to introduce some new characters, except the train is massive and we always seem to focus on the same few people. Just an interesting one there, and it's a trope from TV shows which I always notice and find humorous, especially when the show acknowledges it. Alex comes out of the Big Alice door and presents a list of demands and says how the Snowpiercer is dead in the water, or snow, yeah, you get what I mean. Our intrepid train cannot move under their own steam as the Big Alice is clamped to them and Mr. Wilford has taken control of everything. The runners head off to try and get each thing required on the list, but they lack morphine due to the only just ended civil war. A gigantic new villain comes out of the Big Alice, and he looks like an absolute unit, and we'll discuss him a bit later in this video. I think Wilford has been conducting some experiments as we see this guy in a tube thing in the Season 2 trailer. This list isn't a list of essential supplies, this is just a list of food that I imagine they have run out of on the Big Alice, and Mr. Wilford wants to keep his life of luxury topped up. All the while, poor old Mel is stuck outside like she was at the end of last season. Now Ben communicates with her on the radio and knows that Wilford can control the train, except Mel cannot disconnect the train, as the tale gets even colder due to both trains just staying in place. She struggles to disconnect them as the train starts moving, but she plants a bomb on the connector, which she will use later as a trap to ensure that both trains stay together forever, so Wilford cannot just leave the Snowpiercer to die and then just clear all the bodies out. She heads into the Big Alice to confront Mr. Wilford and heads through the disinfection room as she's going into a very 2022 supermarket. I imagine that's where we're going next in society. And I think Wilford must know she was coming as he kept a unicorn onesie for her as she has frostbite on the back of her shoulder. Even with the suit, it's a perilous journey. We finally get to see our boy Mr. Wilford as he greets Mel to his train, and to be honest, I kind of expected a bit more from the first encounter that we properly see of Mr. Wilford. I know we had the sort of weird trailer at the end of last season for this season where he comes out grinning, and I think that he should have been the one who talks to the rest of the Snowpiercer. I mean, Sean Bean did deliver here as always, but the writing didn't seem to make him that menacing, but it's lucky that Sean Bean has such charisma. We didn't get to see much from him, despite the story flitting from him to the main train, and it does suffer from this season opener syndrome, where there is so much to actually catch up on and also introduce. We never get to see too much of the backstory and the history of Big Alice, and I hope further down the train track we actually get an episode like we had in Lost, where we had a whole episode from the perspective of the tail part of the plane there, and that would work here as we had a whole episode with the perspective of Mr. Wilford and the Big Alice. Wilford seems to want to know exactly who is driving the train, and he has his suspicion as he asks if it is Ben who is the one driving the train, and it seems like he's aware of the relationship that Mel had with the dashing engineer, And I consider that, well, she has wanted to get away from Wilford, including her daughter. There is a lot more to explore here. Maybe it's a Ben Linus and Juliet situation, and Ben is here as Goodwin in the show, and Wilford is Ben Linus. And yes, this is the second reference to the 15-year-old show I am having in this video, as I'm binging on it right now, and it really is still the best show ever made. It turns out that Wilford was even sneakier than we expected, and he did climb the Rocky Mountain test track, again, something that was shown in the trailer, and waited in idle for the Snowpiercer to arrive so he could grab them when they passed him, or at least catch up to them, as we saw last season. He is desperate to take back the Snowpiercer, but Mel fills him in on the idea that she was just pretending he was still on the train and controlling it, something I thought was really cool, and he seemed absolutely disgusted and shocked by. And he's also angry that the train has been taken over by peasants. He seems like the worst person, but I'm worried that this episode shows he may descend into a cartoony evil villain, and I'm worried he will go full Nick Cage. But again, that's probably just me nitpicking. The Big Alice seem to be a lot more like the movie, with eccentric characters like the scientists and clearly defined roles on the train. It's just like how it was very, very rigid in the movie version. Mel finally gets to meet Alex, and the moment, it felt a bit off. Maybe it's the time between the seasons, or maybe it's just that my hype got out of control. But we have the usual know-it-all daughter who hates her mother. Alex felt a bit too much like a trope, but again, perhaps I'm just nitpicking here, as overall I did enjoy the episode, but it did kind of feel like a season finale. Mel is then taken to the brig on the Big Alice, as Alex says she's underwhelmed by her mother. Clearly, Wilford has gaslit her very, very well. Back on the Snowpiercer, things are on edge, as not only does Leighton have to deal with a post-Civil War train, but the train itself is now falling apart, and now he has the owner clamp himself to the train to come and take it back. His baby mama reminds everyone that Wilford is here to rule, not just have a class system and take his train back, but he wants to be the de facto king of what is left of humanity. However, she is under threat after selling Josie out last season, as the laundry team are livid with her, but she's safe as she's pregnant, and Audrey changes her mind about the whole thing, and she seems to be very doting as a sort of adoptive auntie there for the future child. I thought she would go full Wilford simp, but she explains it well, that she just wants what is best for the train and survival of humanity, as Andre enacts martial law speaking to the train, which, while it won't be popular, it is needed, as he intends to go full-on assault at the Big Alice. He's trying his hand once more. Now, in the brig, Mel is actually conversing with Alice, and we learn that the grandparents that were supposed to look after Alex didn't want to get on the train, and neither did Alice, because she wanted to stay with them until Mr. Wilford came by. It seems Alex is more angry at Mel than it is a case of being gaslit, as at the end she seemed to sort of disrespect the esteemed man. They talk about what it's like outside, as Alex says that nematodes will survive, and how Mel sent Alex away to hide from Wilford, which is interesting, and I really hope we learn more of that backstory, and that Mel also took a snow sample, which is very, very weird. And I think that this might be a hint that there will be some stuff off train, as in the trailer for season 2 we did see Mel on a snow speeder, so I expect we will have that as a mystery, as there's way more to that than it seems, as Andre and his baby mama are then given a suite that belonged to an 80-year-old couple who took suicide pills when the Tail Army first breached. Now, it's very cool, as well, it's a weird one saying it's very cool, but what I'm saying is that I really like that we saw the other side of this, the people who aren't maybe evil, but they're just first class, and they're worried about this, so it is collateral damage from the Tails Revolution. Now, Mel, back in the brig, sees some graffiti, and it seems like Wilford does have an iron grip over the train, and I would be interested to see who is writing that very, very weird graffiti, as she's taken to some weird scientists. Now, I expect we will get some experiments, as the draws weren't expanded upon last season, and we have the freak guy immune to cold, and we saw him in a test tube in the trailer. We then see Pike trading drugs for fruit, and Stephen Ogg is just amazing in this show. I don't think I've seen him in a bad role here. And the problem is that we have the creepy murderer from last season come up, and she's just a Harley Quinn knockoff. Now, Andre finds Pike puffing on the herb and comes up with a plan to bait Big Alice into trading and then attack him, which works, as Kevin, the Big Alice version of Audrey, is taken hostage, which was hilarious, as he seems to be so very, very scared. And while he's taken, he does say that, well, you're all in a bad position here, as it seems like Mr. Wilford did really some bad stuff on that train. And we do then see Wilford and Mel at dinner, and he says that, well, he's going to send in someone to get rid of this revolution, the second revolution, which he does. He sends in the mountain that freezes to stop it, and the all-out attack is clearly not going to work at all. I personally think this guy might have been made to withstand cold in experiments. Now, Wilford is furious as he decides to drop anchor and let Snowpiercer freeze and then come back if Andre doesn't surrender. However, our girl Mel has a big brain moment, as she previously planted a bomb after telling Wilford years ago that the clamp mechanism is risky, and as Alex decouples it, it explodes, and Alex seems to be very, very impressed by that. And both the trains now need to work together, which was really, really genius. Jennifer Connelly remains really the best part of this show, apart from Audrey, and I'm really hoping that Sean Bean is given some meaty stuff to work with. While there was a lot going on, I wanted more backstory of Wilford about how they survived, and at least this wasn't a dull opener, and it just comes down to personal preference. The cliffhanger felt weird last season, and I'm glad the show has returned, as we now have a fair bit on TV, and subsequently a fair bit to cover on this channel with American Gods, The Stand, WandaVision, and now this show. So as always, let me know what you think down below. Please do subscribe with notifications if you want more, as we've got these coming out weekly. And do like as well if you enjoyed it. And I will see you soon, and goodbye. Just remember to stay safe, people, and be cool to each other.